Are you a midlife Christian woman experiencing the changes that accompany an empty nest? Maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable, like you don't know what to do next? Well, you're not alone, and you don't have to figure it out by yourself. In our conversation today, we're going to talk about the emotional roller coaster of the empty nest season and how to find purpose and peace and maybe even joy in that quiet. We're going to be looking at it from a biblical perspective, but also we're going to be looking at it from a grief and a neuroscience perspective as well. Now, as a bonus, we've created a free playlist just for you. It's called Songs for the Journey because music has a powerful way of validating our feelings, offering comfort, and lifting our spirits. So grab your free download in the description and let's walk this season together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pivot Pointers. I'm Mary Beth, and I'm here with my co-host and co-founder, Terry.
Howdy.
We at Pivot Point Coaching, we help midlife Christian women navigate changes and transition using faith and neuroscience and practical tips to help you kind of navigate the wild terrain of midlife and beyond. And today we are going to be talking about empty nest, which we could probably spend a couple, hours talking about empty nest. But I think today we're going to kind of hone in on two facets of empty nest.
Yeah, we're going to talk today about the brain science behind the empty nest, like really what's going on in your brain and why that impacts the way you feel about having an empty nest. I think that's kind of an important thing for people to understand. And Mary Beth, we're going to talk about the fact that empty nest is a grief for people as well, that it can be a very a challenging and a difficult loss for women. So do you want to start with grief?
Yeah, let me talk. I'm one of those weird people. I like to talk about grief. I think because society kind of brushes grief under the table and it's such a big part of life. I mean, you can grieve. Like yesterday, I dropped my orchid on the floor that I love, and it just shattered. And I was like, "Oh, my orchid!" It was almost like a mini grief. Grief can take many forms, and empty nest can be one of those. I remember when my oldest son pulled out of the driveway. And let me tell you, I was ready for him to go. Like, I think the Lord prepares you to let them go because, like, 17 going into 18, they can be kind of challenging. But I remember he pulled away and I went into his room and I sat on the bed and cried because I was like, oh no, now he's gone and who's gonna make me laugh and all of those things. So there is definitely some grief involved. And I think understanding that going in, you are going to experience that. And it's okay, it's normal, it's natural, and maybe just it's okay to sit on the bed and cry a little bit. Find some support, find some people to talk to.
Let me ask you a question. We just also recently talked about identity. So how is the change in identity related to grief as well? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so your son leaves, and so now your role is changing. It may not be entirely gone. You're still a mom, but it's a different kind of relationship that you have. So, like, that's a grief as well, kind of that change of how you think about yourself.
Yeah, it's an identity shift. And with identity shifts always comes grief. That's just true too, because it's a loss in a way. Sure. And because my son was very involved in like football in high school, we had that football mom thing going or track. And so that whole part of Friday night football, cooking burgers for the team and all of that stuff went away. So part of me had to, what am I going to do on a Friday night now? And I was still like, I had still two kids at home. So it wasn't like I was empty nesting per se, but it was definitely a shift in how you handle things, and one less person to cook for and one less person to do laundry for and all of those things, one less person to worry about after 10 o'clock at night. So it was all of those things that caused me to, yes, feel like that empty kind of, I don't know where it hits you. Grief always gets me like right here in the chest area. Just that like punch in the chest. And then I just had to sit and process that. And I know a lot of my friends, and I'm sure you could tell stories too, of people who got really blindsided by empty nest grief. We're not expecting that empty feeling that you can get when they leave. Now, for me, like I said, I still had 2 kids. I was still working full time, and so maybe that empty nest transition was a little bit easier for me. What I did is how I coped with that is I went out to Target and bought new bedding and new decorations, and I redid his room. That was how I coped with it. So when he came home, he was like, "What happened to my room?" And I was like, I needed to cope with you being gone, and this was how I did it. So it was one of those things.
Well, it's interesting is because if we look at the brain science of that a little bit, what happens is that our brain is wired for caregiving because we've done it for years and years and years. So that, as we care for, our child, right? It gives our brain like these regular doses of dopamine because it's, when you're raising children, it's like purpose and reward, and that's that little hit of dopamine. And then when that role changes, even if you have other children at home, it's changing a little bit. And it can feel like something's missing because to your brain, it actually is. Something is missing. And so, when we have, especially when your last child leaves, okay, what happens is we get a drop in our oxytocin because they're gone. So, that warm, connected kind of feeling that you get, that's from oxytocin. That's a hormone, it's a bonding hormone that is released in our bodies. And when the child leaves, that physical connection and it's a lower oxytocin level, and that triggers sadness and emptiness in us. And I know for me, what my thing was, and I have children that span a wide age gap. So it was 5 years from the third child going to college and the final child, my fourth child, going to college. So I had kind of a long time to prepare for that. But for me, because physical affection is important to me, because I think I get a nice oxytocin hit from that, I lean into my husband and expect a lot more cuddles and love, physical love that way from him. Make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. And yes, that last child leaving the home is very different than the first or second child leaving the home. And again, my daughter at 17 and 18 was a lot for me. She used to say, "Don't infantilize me, Mom." Um, she wanted to grow up. She didn't want all of that. And so when she left, it was almost like, oh, it was kind of like a breath of fresh air. I didn't have that. But then it was like, oh my gosh, my house is empty. And we do have a really close relationship. And I did feel that drop. I didn't know it at the time that that's what was happening to my brain. It's kind of what I love about neuroscience. What I've learned about it now is it explains all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to feel crazy. You can say, well, actually, this is the way God designed me. And he's also going to help kind of rewire my brain and form, new ways of thinking and functioning. So, but at the time I didn't know about that. And so I just felt off.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me, I'm a knowledge is power kind of personality. Not everybody is like that, but I do think it's helpful to understand that your brain does not like big changes. It just doesn't like big changes because it activates that, the amygdala in our brain. That's that alarm system that goes off, it's the fight or flight part of our brain. So when there's a change, even like the changes you're watching your child drive off, that change your brain does not like. And so that actually your body interprets that as that uncertainty, that change is uncertainty equals stress. So your body kind of responds that, oh, this is stressful. That's why you feel that way, because your brain doesn't like uncertainty. And so that's how your body interprets it. It kind of releases some stress hormones. But I think knowing that can be very helpful to midlife women, that this is very natural. My body is doing what God designed it to do. And, part of who I am and the way that I think about myself is actually stored in my neural pathways in my brain. It's your brain is wired itself around roles like mom or nurturer. And so when we lose those roles or they change, it takes time and it takes intentionality to kind of help your brain kind of, rewire itself, kind of a new sense of self. It takes time to adjust. real normal. But if we don't understand that's the way God designed our bodies, it can make us feel like something's like wrong, if that makes sense.
Right. I'm broken, or
Mhm.
I'm off, or I'm crazy, or whatever we want to say, um, to explain what we're feeling. Yeah, brain likes what we say safe and predictable, right? Steady, big changes, not so
Doesn't
much.
like those.
Makes you feel a little off kilter at times. And then you have the how did your brain, when your amygdala sends off the alarm? Are you a fight, flight, or freeze person? Are
Uh-huh.
you shut down and crawl into bed? And I think we always laugh at that Leanne Morgan video where she said, when my daughter left, I took to the bed and I ate, and I watched Netflix, and I ate chocolate covered blueberries. And right. So there's one way of reacting. Another way is, you get frantic, you might get irritable and angry, and you're snapping at everybody. So there's lots of different ways you can respond.
Yes, Mary Beth, and here's the truth. And I think it's really important that midlife women understand this, that my husband and I stood together on the balcony waving to our last child as he drove off. And we loved him. It was a blessing to us, but it was his time to leave the nest, right? So you've got my husband and I standing on that porch waving goodbye. And to your point, we're going to respond differently. He's different than I am. We're different personalities. God has made us differently. And we're going to respond to that change in our brains in a different way. It doesn't have to be the same way, but they're both okay. They're both normal. And it's just the way that God has designed us. And so we have to be gracious with ourselves as we deal with this new change and our brain is trying to adapt. And also for the other people in our lives that are dealing with that change, that loss as well.
Yeah, and that can, I mean, in grief and loss as a whole, too, like that can cause some conflict in a husband and a wife, because everybody does do it differently. And you do have to have grace for that other person and let them walk the way they're going to walk through that path, um, versus the way you're going to do it. I remember after, this is an empty nest thing, but after my dad died, and my husband was like, we happened to be on vacation when it happened, and I flew to Florida for the funeral and then back to vacation. And my husband picked me up from the airport and was like, oh, this is what we did today, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, don't you understand that I just lost my father? And I like went crazy. And he was like, he didn't know what happened, but we were on different, planes.
Yes.
So it's grace for myself, and also grace for everybody grieves differently.
Yeah, and I think that there is good news, and that is that, our brains adapt. They can adapt because of neuroplasticity, and our brains are actually built by God to renew. So, with intentionality, with prayer, with connection, we can literally reshape our thoughts, our emotions, and our identity. So empty nest is not the end of the line. It is a real jolt to your brain when it happens, but we are built to be renewed. So that's the amazing thing to me. I just love how neuroscience actually supports in so many ways the scripture and how it is that God designed us and what he says about us.
So, Terry, how did you survive the last one, leaving the nest?
Well, I think that I think it's actually for me, because I said kind of I'm a knowledge is power kind of person. I really lean into beginning to find that new next step, that new phase for me. What knowing that God's not done with me, and so there's something else that He has for me. I mean, He's equipped me with certain gifts and talents and skills, just as He has all women, and so it was the next thing for me was like, how do I need to think about myself differently? And where is it that God's giving me an opportunity to find new purpose? And so that process is kind of what helps you kind of move beyond that and begin to find new neural pathways about thinking about yourself and kind of what God has for you.
Yeah, definitely. I redecorated all of my children's rooms when they left. That was my first step. I don't know what it was about
Oh,
like buying a new comforter and curtains that made me feel better, but that I did it. And then I was maybe a little bit slower on the now what do I do with myself um on the uptake after that.
yeah. So that's interesting, but that's different people. So for me, it was, what do I now need to get involved in? What new nonprofit do I work for? What new community group am I involved with? What new relationships, new friendships do I need to form? So I was a little bit more external than that. It wasn't like I needed to do anything in the house to kind of do that, but I needed to look outside. Yeah.
Outside the house. But
Yeah.
we both survived. We
Yep.
both came out the other side okay.
Uh-huh.
And I absolutely love being a mom of adult children now. I just think it's a nice shift in the relationship. So once I
Too.
got through that, I
Yeah.
felt so much better.
Yeah, me too. And I think that maybe that also is part of the reshaping of your brain, is that thinking about it's not that I'm not a nurturer anymore, because like you say, I am a nurturer. I am very connected to my adult children. I love them and I want to support them in different kind of ways than I did when they were in the home. So and I think it's partly accepting that and allowing your brain to kind of rebuild new ways of thinking about, your identity, if that makes sense. But it doesn't happen if we're not intentional about it.
No, right. Everything requires us to do a little bit of work to kind of move forward. God's there and the Holy Spirit, and they're walking alongside of you and they're helping all of those things happen. But it is an active process. You have to take control, and whatever that looks like. For me, it was
Right.
redecorating. For Terry, it was getting involved. So it's whatever that looks like for you. Lean into that and kind of do that. So
And if I could say this, Mary Beth, I do think that looking at verses like Romans 12:2, which is, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that isn't just an emotional thing. It's actually a neurological thing. So God has designed us and our minds to grow, to heal, to shift to a new season of purpose. And so just resting on that verse and knowing that's a real thing. It's not just a feel good. It's actually a true thing, that is a transformative thing that happens to us physiologically. And there's great comfort in that it's not random, that God actually designed us to lean into that transformation, that renewal of our mind.
that renewal of our minds. And
Yeah.
so, guys, if this was interesting to you or if this struck a chord, we have a whole other video on pivot pointers about empty nest and how to survive that. And so, check that out for sure. We'd love you to comment and tell us about your empty nest experience. We do read the comments. I always tell Terry I'm only going to read the nice ones and she can read the negative ones, but we do read them and we will respond. And so check us out. And we also have other great resources on our website for you. And we'd love for you to reach out and connect.
Sounds good. Okay, take a look at the description on the video. There's lots of links there for some free things for you that can be really helpful. We hope that works for you.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time.